welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, welcome to Syosset's Turn the Page podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, and I am here with the author of a book, which is, if many of us were fans of a lot of those horse series when we were kids, and, this is very different, and it's much more of an adult story in the way that it's more mature in like some of the things that it deals with. But it's almost like if you're looking to fill that hole in your heart and you want to read books about like the equestrian world, this is a good place to go. So I know that this is a standalone versus you have some series, but why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about The Jump?
Okay. Well, hi, I'm Natalie Keller Reinert. I write horse books for grown-ups. And The Jump is my latest, I would say, yeah, saddle club for adults. I grew up a horsewoman. I came from a non-horsey family, so I was a suburban girl who, managed to work her way through riding lessons and sort of ran away at 18 to ride horses in Ocala, Florida, which is the equestrian capital of the country. And I began writing fiction very young. And when I started writing fiction, actually with the idea of publication in mind, I went ahead and wrote about what I knew best, which was the horse world. And that has translated into a full career for me. I have been publishing since 2011. And The Jump is my first novel with a major publishing house. And it is my novel that delves the deepest into the backside of the equestrian world, as well as sort of, like great trainers and fun friends and lots of horses, but also what else is going on at the top of equestrian sport. And it's true of any elite sport, right? There's so many secrets and stories and scandals. And so I dip into that in this novel for the first time.
Yeah, no, and that's why I kind of struggled because I'm like, I don't want people to think like this is the Saddle Club, except they're older. It's got the heart and it's got, I think it's less surface level. And it really does it maintains the love of the horses, but does kind of open the doors to some of the stuff that's going on in the background. So this is your first traditionally published novel? Because I know
That's
you
right.
have like a whole series, like the eventing series and everything.
Yeah, so, I wrote my first one. I was actually living in Brooklyn at the time, and I had been working on this novella for a really long time. I was 30-ish or so, and I was at a point in my life where I needed some cash, and I lived in Brooklyn, and the Kindle direct publishing world was just opening up. It was a time where you could put a book on Kindle for 99 cents and people would read it. And so that's what I did. I already had a really successful blog. I had been blogging about farm life and retired racehorses and working at the racetrack, all of these things for a long time. And so, I was able to write a novel that had people waiting for it, that liked my writing, and they liked the questions that I was asking, because I have always wondered, why are we like this? Why are we horse people? And is there a sort of life after horses?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And that's amazing. And now look where it's brought you, which is super, super cool. So my question, I think, here is how did you make the jump first from, from Kindle publishing to here?
Okay. Well, that was a jump. It was a very difficult one because Flatiron Books preempted reissuing my Eventing series, which was 8 books, and Briar Hill Farm, which was 3 books, as they're being developed with Amazon MGM Studios for a streaming show. And so and they also asked for, a new original idea, which was the jump. It was originally called Working Student, and it was about, that piece of training life where the best way to get ahead in the horse business is to sort of apprentice yourself to a trainer and sort of hand your life over to them and hope for the best. And so I was working on all of these things simultaneously. I have been editing and revising books for the past 2 years nonstop. I am still doing copy edits for Briar Hill Farm. So what I was basically they were treating the eventing series in Briar Hill Farm like manuscripts, in that these books had already been out for years in some cases, but we were going to do beautiful reissues of them and really dive very deeply into them in the editorial process. So it was a big rewrite on 11 books, in addition to writing this all new story that taps into a different sort of vein than my original stories do. So it has been a real trial by fire learning experience, going from running my own publishing business and putting out my own books and doing everything on my own schedule to the traditional publishing world, which has its own um, idiosyncrasies and
Nuances, yes.
nuances for sure, uh, peculiarities, one might say. Yeah, it has been 2 years of nonstop work to get these books out, but the reissues, I am just tremendously proud of them. The Eventing series was very much a cult favorite anyway. It would pop up on lists where you would least expect it. I remember years ago, Horse Illustrated did a book issue, and Ambition, which is the first book in that series, showed up in the issue as a write-in favorite. So people were literally telling Horse Illustrated, yes, we've read Black Beauty, and we know about Misty of Chincoteague, and we've all read The Black Stallion. And hey, there are these other books that are really about the modern horse world and modern equestrians and the problems that we face. So it has been just brilliant to dig even deeper into those stories and find out more about my characters that way and put them out there for folks.
So Brooke's story, how much of that, I have to ask, was autobiographical in the sense that she had the spark to just go and do what she wanted to do?
Yeah, that's 100% what I'm like. We had a book event recently and somebody said, would you recommend, like, what would you say to someone who said they wanted to be a working student? And I would say, do it. I have never made a sound decision in my life. I would never for 1 second recommend somebody do something thoughtful and careful. I think you should jump in all the time. And that's always, been, I went to be a working student when I'd been a working student as like a teenager and even as a tween, working off riding lessons. I went off to live on some person's farm and ride with them and do all of their barn chores and, follow them around begging for scraps of food, kind of. I did that when I was 18. And a lot of the really crazy things that happened to Brooke in this book, or even some of the just terrible shocks that aren't actually crazy. That's just sort of how the world works. Like literally, being shown to an apartment, not being given hours or a day off, not being given a paycheck, and not having any food. And it's like, how are you going to solve that problem? That was me at 18. It's just like, I'm sure I'll work 16 hours and then, have absolutely no idea what I'm going to eat and like go look in the horse trailer for crackers. Absolutely. So those pieces were definitely taken from my past, or like not lifted wholesale, but inspired events that happen in the jump. I do, I believe that there's a certain kind of person, and a lot of them happen to be into horses, who will put up with almost anything in order to follow their dream. And it's finding that line that this book is about.
It's interesting because I full disclosure, I wrote a little bit when I was very young. It didn't really go anywhere. I was kind of afraid
Yeah.
of it after a while, but I did hear a lot of times that like the people who are really, really successful in the horse world, and I'm thinking about your book also, you have characters who like Lennox who come from a very different background, that you need to start out with money. It was an interesting balance kind of watching that and just sort of being dropped in through the role of somebody who really did just sort of take the reins and her horse and head on into it. For people who are not horse savvy, because I've read, just like in general, you get like rave reviews, and there's people who are like very into the world and they're like, this is spot on. And then there are people who are like, I knew nothing about this world, but I feel like I live in it. How would you say, that you would describe eventing to somebody who's never heard of it before, if you are drawing them in?
Well, eventing is sort of the English equestrian world, like scrappy, grassroots, bratty cousin. When I started eventing as a teenager, one of the things that drew me to it was its lack of fancy. That it was almost like you could have a rusty trailer competition in the field where where everyone parked. It wasn't about like the big rigs and the gaudy trailers and trucks and things like that. It was literally like, we want to gallop our horses in this field and jump logs, and people are going to say we're crazy, and it's a good time. So that's a triathlon of crazy people on horseback, and everyone has to behave really nicely in an arena for the first phase. And then they get to go wild, jumping big natural, like field hunting type obstacles in the cross country phase. And that's everyone's fave. And then you have to behave over jumps in the show jumping phase. And that's eventing in a nutshell. It's a triathlon, and we're all just there for the galloping and the jumping. Eventers are generally known as the party people of the horse show world. Eventing competition parties and barn parties are usually a very good time. It's just a more it's always been like a more family oriented grassroots kind of sport. And money has entered into it recently, and that has really changed the front, sort of facing view of the sport. But it was always just it was like the big picnic time. That was the fun show.
Was Roxy based on any horses that you have known in your lifetime?
100%. Roxy's an off-track thoroughbred. Off-track thoroughbreds, retired racehorses are, or used to be the bread and butter of eventing. They are just incredible at it because they love to run. They're bold and they love that kind of job. And you still find off-track thoroughbreds at the top of the sport, even though they were bred for racing, and they're competing against horses that were bred specifically for eventing. So the thing about Roxy is she's a mare, and a lot of people ride geldings, male horses, specifically because they're the more chill puppy dog version of the horse world, whereas mares have opinions, and they're used to being the head of the herd, right? Like horse herds are matriarchies. They're mostly brood mares, and they get so sick of the boys that they kick them out of the herd and make them run their own little side gangs called bachelor bands out in the real world. So the thing about a mare is that every sort of day you have to prove yourself. You have to say, I'm worth following. And if she doesn't believe you're worth following, she will insist that she has to deal with you herself. She has to take care of things. You are not trustworthy. I had a mare named Bonnie who never believed I was trustworthy. She was just like, you cannot run your own life, and you definitely can't run mine. Like, she just had no time for me whatsoever. I couldn't do anything with Bonnie. And she was beautiful. I'm not like a person that, prioritizes beauty in a horse. But oh my God, Bonnie was the most beautiful horse you'd ever seen. And she just had no time for me whatsoever. I gave her to a friend, and Bonnie went on to, like, she would swim for you. She led fox hunts, like the front horse, jumping everything, the hounds.
Wow, Bonnie was holding back
Bonnie
on
said,
you.
no, Natalie, no, Natalie, no, Natalie. And so what's the line between that? How could I have gotten Bonnie to trust me? I probably could have with things that I know now. And a lot of the things that I know now are like natural horsemanship techniques, positive reinforcement techniques, ways of going out there and saying, I don't want to run your life, but I do think we can work together. And those are things that Brooke will have to learn, that are kind of in short supply at the farm where she goes to work. So I think that that test, that learning phase in your like early 20s, I think is very interesting when you're learning about empathy for animals and you're moving on from your teenage years. And I think when you cross that line, it says a lot about like who you are, how you were raised, your personality, and how much you actually love animals versus I love a sport that I'm good at that is exciting. And so I think those are sort of integral to the story and the sport as a whole.
Did you find it difficult to deal with the darker aspects of the horse world? To really kind of, like we'd spoken about before, kind of open the door. I mean, we all hear about various abuses that take place in various sports. Unfortunately, there's like power struggles in everything. For you, was it hard to write about that?
Yeah, I had to take a mindset shift and decide that I really felt like I wanted to introduce this into my stories because I have a very devoted reader base and they have an expectation that, I'm going to give them good people. I'm going to exemplify the best of the sport. And that has always been really important to me. It just felt like something that couldn't be ignored anymore. And so then I had to decide how I was going to present, sort of misdeeds in the horse world. I didn't want to write a book about animal cruelty. That's not what anybody's looking for from me, or, my readership isn't looking for it in general. But it needed to be, sort of like there needed to be an indictment, but without graphic writing, which would be no fun for anyone. I picked a scapegoat. I picked a piece of riding equipment called draw reins, and some people love them, and I think more and more people hate them. And I kind of said, okay, we're going to use draw reins. They're going to be our scapegoat for this, and they're going to stand in for a multitude of sins that are performed against horses. And I used that to try to, illustrate what this person was capable of, what this person's training philosophies were, because one of the things that needs to be addressed is that these training philosophies are not new and they're not shocking to most people. It's just about how they're being utilized. So it was definitely a shift, and I was really relieved when early reviews came back and people were willing to go on that ride with me. I really was. But I think I'm surrounded by great people, and I think that the equestrian community as a whole is experiencing growth in this direction, where you're seeing trainers who are really moving like into natural horsemanship techniques and stuff that didn't used to feel applicable to professional elite sports. They felt like two different worlds, and now we're starting to see them merge. So it's a good moment.
So you already mentioned that Amazon has picked up your stories, which is extremely exciting. This particular book is a standalone. Would you write about these characters again?
I would 100% write about these characters again. Brooke is standing on the precipice of who she's going to be. And Lennox is, she's comes from a completely different background, but she is too. Like she has a lot of choices ahead of her, and she's funny and fascinating to me. She has some interesting she has some interesting obstacles in her way too, because she is mixed race and she's in an extremely white sport. And so people are going to make assumptions about you based on how you look, based on your last name, things like that. And so that is always an interesting trail to go down, especially in Florida. And then Annis, who is the barn manager of the story, is one of my favorite kinds of equestrians, where she has been there and she has done that, and she's just trying to ride through it, man. And so Annis is at a turning point at the end of the jump as well, and I would absolutely love to write more about all three of them.
Well, if again your readers have anything to say, everybody seems to want to read more about them.
Yeah.
That should be really exciting. It's got to be really exciting, to make the jump, obviously, to traditional publishing and also having your books picked up for streaming, but also to take that leap of faith to write about things that you weren't sure how it was going to be, if it was going to be too much for your devoted fan base that got you where you were, and see that it was so well received.
Oh, yeah. No, it's incredible. It absolutely is that I was able to, step outside of the eventing series, which is really important to people. And I understand that. And that's why it's so long and why it is, picked up for streaming and all of these things. And to say, okay, these are new characters. And this is a new direction. We're going to talk about some new stuff, and some of it's going to be, a little scary. And everybody said, yes, no, we're doing this. And that's when that tells me I've been doing the right thing all along, that people were willing to come on this journey with me too. And nobody has, sort of said, oh, look at Natalie, calling trainers cruel and stuff like that, because it's just that it's apparent to people what I am talking about, that it's a conversation that we need to have is just really great.
Thank you so much. Check out The Jump. Do you have any information about the streaming series? When we might know more about it?
I don't. It's a situation in development. I have really excited people working on it, and everybody is, yeah, like super thrilled to be doing it. With a lot of passionate people on the team. There's a lot of horse people in Hollywood, and everybody wants a really good show. So we're doing it.
Last but not least, do you have a favorite horse book, just in general? It could be one from childhood. It could be one that you just discovered.
Well, I'll give you one from childhood. I grew up on the Black Stallion. I'm a Black Stallion devotee. I still read all the Black Stallion books every couple years. Doesn't take that long. They're short, and I know them all by heart. And my favorite one of those is The Black Stallion's Courage. I have written a young adult novel that is a modern day homage to the Black Stallion that I think people are really going to love. So I'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Oh, do we know when it might be out?
We don't know. I've finished editing it not too long ago, so it must be in the hands of the publishers henceforth.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Natalie. It was a delight to chat with you. Check out The Jump. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.